My name is Soipan Tuya. I'm the women representative for Narok County. I'm serving my second term, that makes me the pioneer women representative after the adoption of the new Constitution of Kenya. I grew up, I was born, raised, and did my early schooling in Narok County. A typical village girl growing up. I went to primary school in Narok South constituency in a school called Olentutu Arid Zone Primary School. That's where I completed my primary education. I came as a top girl in Narok district then, and got admitted to the Kenya High School. Upon completing my prior secondary school education, I moved on to study law at the University of Nairobi. I also went through the Kenya School of Law and got admitted to the bar as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya in 2004. I went on to further my studies. In 2009, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, United States of America. I studied Sustainable International Development as a Master in Law. I've also worked in various capacities during my inception of my work life. I have served as a UN volunteer attached to the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs then. I have also worked with the Kituo cha Sheria in various capacities. I have served as a gender and law expert working for a USAID program which focused on conservation issues, women and land rights. Over the years, I developed my interest in really focusing on matters affecting women, marginalized groups and communities. As a young lawyer, I never set up a private law firm. I thought the best way to reach the underprivileged people, and especially from marginalized groups, and that puts women at the center of it, the issue of land and property rights. I worked with the various institutions, like I've said, and non-governmental organizations, offering pro bono legal services as a land law and gender expert. And that is where I found my satisfaction, because you will realize that for most the marginalized groups, people who need legal services to enforce their rights, most of them are poor, and by and large our justice system is fairly expensive for an ordinary Kenyan. And therefore I thought that if I set up a law firm, I would not be able to reach these people. They could not afford me. The other thing is that I worked mostly within the pastoralist communities, mostly those that I could speak their language. Again, you will realize that in our legal and justice system, the language there is almost intimidating and complicated for most people to actually comprehend and be able to situate their rights therein. And I thought, going down to the level of the community, I called myself a community lawyer, where I would actually be able to, interact with the people I worked for, and get to speak to them in the language they understand, and they speak to me in the language where they are comfortable, to be able to support and offer them the kind of legal aid they needed. What makes working with groups, community groups, and largely before I joined politics, is really being able to see the law and the justice system working for people who would otherwise never be able to support themselves to reach a courtroom and get justice. That to me gave me a lot of satisfaction. Ordinarily, somebody might think that once you go through legal training, the best thing to do is to delve into your private business, make a lot of money. But I found a lot of satisfaction in offering myself, offering pro bono services, and bring myself down to the level where I could break down the law to be understood and have the law actually working for these communities. One of the things I did when I was working in a USAID project, we called it the Justice Project. I was based in Nakuru then, and we did a lot of interaction with the communities there. It was around the time when we had just gotten our new constitution, and there was a lot of excitement, particularly about women land rights. And from the Maasai community, where I come from, it was very exciting. I remember back then in 2010 or thereabout, we had some land adjudication processes going on in my village where I come from. And I decided to test the constitution, to exercise my rights. I was not married then, and I went back to my village and said, hey, I want my portion of my land. As my father's daughter, he has his portion, my brothers have their portion. Can I have mine? And the uproar that came with that demand was just unimaginable. I had a nephew who was 1 year old. His name was on the list for land allocation. But for me, a lawyer, a woman from this same village with my nephew, my name could not be put on the list. And yet the Constitution gives me the right to be able also to enjoy my land rights. And I did not pursue it. I knew I could maybe go to court and fight it out. But it just hit me so hard. Like, if for me, a learned woman from the Maasai community cannot enforce my land rights given to me by the Constitution of Kenya, you can imagine those other women, most of them illiterate, extremely poor, have no clue about their rights. So that gave me the drive to keep doing what I was doing, trying to break down the law and working with the various actors to see how does this law become a reality for an ordinary woman out there. So we had this project called the Justice Project, where through the support of USAID, we brought together village elders, we brought together various court user associations. I remember I was working in Nakuru then, and we had some very good judges we were working with, and magistrates, and various court users, the chiefs and the administrators. And we were just saying, look, here is a constitution. What I was doing is to translate. We actually translated the constitution to the village elders down there and said, these are the rights that are here. Can we make them a reality? Can we also have women join the rest of Kenyans to enjoy their rights without it raising conflicts? Because you know that land issues also bring a lot of conflicts at right from the household level. So we had community conversations about women enjoying their rights. And you realize that all this stereotyping and discrimination against women, when you talk and discuss even with the very elderly people at the village level, they have nothing really. There is no basis for discrimination against women. You know, that project escalated into what we saw the Chief Justice then, Willy Mutunga, take very seriously about alternative justice systems, where we were trying to create a linkage between the formal court system with those of the elders, and making sure that we sieve out these oppressive practices at the village level, at the village elders level, and see what cases needed to have, you know, referred to the formal justice system, which ones needed to just be left at that level where the elders, and we managed to convince elders to actually include women in their sittings. So we had some women village elders, things that had not been done before. So I found a lot of satisfaction in doing that work because, you know, we have great laws, our constitution is very progressive, but when it comes to how much that impacts the common mwananchi, it leaves a lot to be desired. I actually come from a political family. My father was a member of parliament in the 8th and 9th parliament, Honorable Samson Ole Tuya. He was member of parliament for Narok South. I remember growing up, I was never the one to follow in my father's footsteps. It actually came as a surprise, if I may say, because I would normally be the recluse in the house, where I wouldn't want to be in public functions or be in, curiously wanting to listen in on the public barazas or the meetings that were brought to our homestead. But I would say that despite not having developed interest in politics when my father was in active politics, and actually even my mother was a councillor. She was a councillor, now MCAs. She was a councillor in the Narok County Assembly. Despite not having developed any political interest then, you know, politics is about interacting with people, feeling their needs, their need for support, and creatively coming up with solutions, either through legislations or various other interventions to make sure that the system, the law, is working for Kenyans. And like I said, you know, working pro bono and working with communities earlier on in my legal career prepared me for this. So I came into politics in 2013 as a pioneer women representative for Narok County. I had overwhelming support from the young people and women. In fact, I only got into, I remember 2 years before the elections of 2013, I was approached by a number of people and told to run for the position of women representative. But I actually called a big baraza at my parents' home and told them, please let me be, I'm not ready for politics. Actually, we had a meeting of about 3,000 people at my parents' home, and I said, please leave me alone, I'm not ready. Just I'll support any other woman. Then when the new county government comes in, I'm ready to serve Narok as maybe a speaker or any other position, but not elective office. Little did I know that 2 months into the election, I would be plunged right into the campaigns. We lost one of the women candidates, the late Patricia Persitau, and immediately when she passed on 2 months to the elections, I was called. I was on holiday with my family in Mombasa, and I was told, you're the one who is stepping into these shoes. And the rest is history. I got in there, I got the highest number of votes in the entire county. Actually, we shared the same votes with His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, and all the other candidates got the lower votes than myself in the elections in 2013. There was the time of campaign was very short, but a number of issues came up. The usual bashing of women. So during the campaigns, they were saying, oh, this girl, she's not even married. We will give her the seat, and she might end up being married by a Mzungu, and then she goes away with our seat. They said I might get married to another tribe and, take the seat out of Narok County. So there was a lot of that, and it was almost traumatizing for me because I was not used to the political space. So all that propaganda, they even made up boyfriends for me, saying that I had a boyfriend from a certain community. And once you give this girl the seat, your seat would be taken to Kisumu or, But by God's grace, I came in, I won the seat, and came into Parliament. It was very exciting, I must say, being among very many young people who came into Parliament then. I got selected to chair the Committee on Implementation. Quite exciting. It was the pioneer Committee on Implementation. I know in the history of Parliament, there was an attempt to establish the Committee on Implementation way back, but it never really took off. So I would say that the Committee on Implementation of 2013, which I chaired, was a pioneer committee, a very critical committee. It forms the nexus between the legislature and the executive, because what this committee does is to follow through on resolutions of the House to make sure they're implemented, and if they're implemented, to what extent they're implemented, and again, to make sure they're implemented within the required time frame. The other key thing, the role of this committee was to follow through on undertakings by the executive, again, to make sure they're implemented within the required time frame. Petitions, really, to make sure that, for me, I looked at the Committee on Implementation as the one to make sure that Parliament was not just a mere talk show. And I remember being the chair and being a member of the ruling party. It really didn't augur well for me. And I remember when I did my legacy report, or the handing over report at the end of the term, we actually made a strong recommendation that the Committee on Implementation should be chaired by a member of Parliament who is not from the ruling party, so that it would be chaired by the opposition, because it's basically an oversight. It's an oversight committee, just like PAC and PIC. So it's almost hard it was hard for me as a member of Jubilee to be the one now pushing and oversighting government. And I'm very happy that that recommendation was taken up. And actually now the committee is chaired by a member of the opposition. And I think going forward that should be maintained, so that this committee is clustered together with the other oversight committees. We did quite a lot of work in that committee, which I pride myself in. And I might not be able to highlight everything, but we have our handing over report, which we did in 2017. We were able to follow through certain things like establishment of the livestock insurance for the drought-prone regions, mostly the pastoralist areas. We were able to push through the training and kitting of the NPR, the National Police Reservists, again, to curb the insecurity. And I would quickly say that the work of the Committee on Implementation is continuous, because you realize I said that we are supposed to follow through, see to what extent these issues have been implemented, and make sure they're implemented within the time frame. So it's continuous. It should be followed through so that you know, the issues raised by Parliament or executive undertakings are implemented to a certain conclusion. The issue of inclusion of the elderly in the NHIF cover, again, was one very key issue that we really pressed for implementation, and many others. And for me, being a chairperson, just coming straight into Parliament, and I was picked and selected to chair a committee, is an achievement, and I think I did my best in it. I also served in the Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations, yeah, that was about the first term. Maybe I could just delve into the second term. Come 2017, again, I went into a re-election campaign for the same seat of Women Rep, and I had mentioned briefly that there was a lot of bashing, propaganda around you know, my position. So I said when I came into office, I was a very young unmarried woman, and there was a lot of issue with that. I've already said that. Then I came into Parliament, I got married, and then there was a half about that. Huyu tulimweka bunge aende akapate bwana, and you wonder what is it that people want from women? Should I be single? Should I be married? Or what do they really want? And then I got 2 of my babies in Parliament, and there was an issue about that. There was a lot of bashing on social media. Did we send this one to Parliament to go and get a husband and get babies? And like I said at the beginning, it was not easy, really digesting all that. But one good thing I like about politics, it really forces you to grow a thick skin, because without that, then you will never make it. So, I think for women, we should really be blind and deaf to some of this propaganda that is heaped on us, focusing on our personal lives, and just move, because I believe that as a woman leader, I can still put my family together and serve the country. So I went into my re-election campaign in 2017. Re-election campaigns are tough, and particularly so for me as a woman representative. You remember, this is an affirmative action position established under the 2010 Constitution. I remember the 47 of us, when we came in the first term, we spent a lot of time fighting and pushing, even court battles, to have the National Government Affirmative Action Fund established. And we only succeeded 2 years to the 2017 elections. And that really dented most of our campaigns, because back in the county, and I know these are experiences we shared with most of my colleagues, women representatives, people were quick to say, look, we filled up Parliament with women, 47 women, and they did nothing. And you know, some of the propaganda was, these women just went to sleep in Nairobi, and they are doing nothing for us on the ground. And you realize that without budgetary support for the position of women rep, it became extremely complicated and difficult. One had to be very innovative to survive. I know I had to pull a lot of support from friends. I did a lot of fundraisers to respond to issues of women in the county, to keep myself relevant as we were pushing and fighting to have a budgetary allocation for the women rep position. And like I say, we only succeeded in 2015 when we were almost going into election. And you remember that in 2017, out of 47, we only had 10 of us coming back. There was a whole like 80% turnover of the women reps, the pioneer women reps, and I would attribute it mostly to that lack of a clearly spelled out portfolio, no budgetary support, and we end up looking like we are not really working on the ground, whereas the reality is that we didn't have any supportive infrastructure or budgets to work. I really thank the people of Narok County. They gave me a second chance. It was a tough battle. I had several women fighting it out. And this time round, I said that the first campaign I did only for 2 months. Now this one was the real one, the real test, where you're facing real issues and you're being judged about your track record in the first term of office. And I thank the people of Narok that they gave me that opportunity again. Under the Jubilee ticket, I came through, got sworn in, and got elected into the Speaker's panel as the first chairperson. It's been a great experience. Again, a very comfortable, it's a very comfortable zone for me as a lawyer. The first time I sat on this chair was actually very tense. The kind of experiences that came to mind was the chaotic sessions that had happened before in Parliament. I remember when we were passing the security laws in my first term. I think it was in 2014. The experience was very horrifying. And I thought chances are I would find myself in a similar situation, like what the late Honorable Joyce Laboso found herself in, and the Honorable Speaker. But with time, I fell right into a very comfortable environment. And I would credit that to my background of as a lawyer, working with people, public speaking, and really taking firm decisions. So it has turned out well, and I've had a lot of fun being on this seat. There is a whole lot of a difference when I'm sitting on this chair, presiding over the House, and when I'm seated down there, chairing Committee of the Whole House. The Committee of the Whole House experience is quite relaxing. Up here is a different ballgame. Yeah. So, and I guess Committee of the House, even the kind of deliberations are not as. It just feels different. It's not the same. I say it's been a great experience. There have been a fair share of very stressful moments. One of them being in 2018 during the vote on the finance bill. And I remember that the issue of the VAT was a big issue. There was a lot of commotion and problems in Parliament then, if you remember. Very stressful.
You arise and say no or yes. That is simple.
And I remember again getting a lot of bashing from everywhere. People saying that I behaved worse off than the IEBC chairman. I will not even mention the name. That I rigged the vote when I gave the ayes to push through the VAT. And the court of public opinion is rarely fair on anybody. I would say it was a low moment, because I know I did the right thing, but I say the court of public opinion is normally very harsh and rarely fair on anybody, because I did the right thing. You remember that the vote that was before the House required a 2/3 threshold, and the speaker's ears cannot count 233 members. I mean, the ears cannot count. People can shout as much as they can, but if we don't have the numbers, the sufficient numbers to reach the for 2/3, then it doesn't count. And I remember we had counted the members in the House, and there were 215. We needed 233. But when I put the voice vote, of course, there was the nays shouted louder than the ayes, but the reality of the matter is that we didn't have sufficient numbers for the 2/3. And so I had to rule the way I did. Being a member of the ruling party then, you know, people say it's the system working. Some people said I received a phone call to say the ayes have it, and it's far from the truth. Aside from that, you know, it's been really exciting, moderating Parliament, and we have a very good team, right from the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and my colleagues in the Speaker's panel. And I think we've done our best. We've done our best. We get accused here and there of being biased, but I have never been biased. I try as much as possible to be neutral while on the Speaker seat. We exercise discretion many times, and the standing orders allow us to do that. And sometimes members don't understand, and you just find people throwing wild accusations. But I have been able to take it all in my stride. Coming into Parliament as a young woman, I got 2 of my babies while I was still serving as a member of Parliament. It's not easy striking a balance, and I know as we look forward to the 13th Parliament, and I will be quick to add that at the moment I'm not contesting for any position. I offered myself to run for governor for Narok County. I believed then and still believe that I have a lot to offer as a chief executive of the county, as a governor. There's sufficient resources to really make a turnaround for a county as a governor. I still believe that I would have made a very good governor for Narok for this 2022, but I agreed to defer my dream for now. Through my party, UDA, I'm a member of UDA, we got into a negotiated democracy consensus process, and I agreed to support somebody else. And I believe that my time will come. I got the option of, the offer actually from my party. They offered me a direct ticket to go back and run for a 3rd term as a women rep. I turned it down because I had already moved on. I think 10 years is sufficient for anybody to serve in an affirmative action position. And for me, I would say to the women of this country, I always felt like we should have had a sunset clause on the affirmative action position. That's the only time it would make sense. So I was not ready to run for to serve for 15 years in an affirmative action position. And by the time I was running for governor, I had already gone around Narok County inviting women to take up the position. Actually, I declared the position vacant some like 2 years ago. And I invited women to come and take up that position because I believe that is the purpose of an affirmative action position. So for me, going back to the women rep position was never an option. And there was no other position for me to run in after I accepted to step down for somebody else to run as governor. So I opted to serve the party in another capacity. So currently I'm not running for any office, and I'm proud of that really, because I felt like if I held on to the women rep position, I would have been gatekeeping and denying the next Narok women a chance to vie or to get into parliament. So I'm now happy that in the 13th parliament, we will have another face of a woman from Narok in this house, also having her chance. I think you're asking about the challenges for young mothers. So we are actually looking forward to seeing more women coming into parliament in different capacities in the 13th parliament. I have seen a number of young women nominated by the various parties. So definitely we are going to have more young women in this house. And I would say it's not easy. I always compare myself with my older colleagues. And I think they have a bit of an easier time because I have to juggle between being a wife, a young mother, and a legislator in this house, and also be present for the people of Narok on the ground. It's not easy. It requires a lot of balancing, but it can be done. But I'm looking forward to a day when we will have a very well-established system of accommodating young women, young mothers in this house. A colleague of mine, the Honorable Zulekha Hassan, there's a time she walked into the chamber with her baby, and I could feel her. It was out of frustration. The speaker then was very harsh on her, and everybody was harsh, but I could feel her. I would wish to see a fully equipped creche for women where you can bring your small baby here, come and do your contribution on the floor of the house for 30 minutes, go back and breastfeed your baby, and come back here. This parliament should and must be facilitative, because a failure to do that would be making it 2 times, 3 times, 10 times harder for women to actually discharge their duties. And by the time somebody is elected by, her county, her constituency to come to this house, they have a level of confidence in her. So the role of parliament should be to be very facilitative, to make sure that women are comfortable, regardless of their age, to be able to discharge their duties without any inhibitions. At the moment, we are way below par. We are below the required standard in terms of being accommodative to young women, young mothers. First, let me say that having the requirement for 2/3 entrenched in our constitution was a great idea. However, I think that the requirement for both appointive and elective positions to meet the 2/3 threshold was not very well thought out, particularly on the elective perspective, because how you enforce that remains a big problem, and nobody is willing to think through. Even the drafters of the Constitution, I have not seen them coming strongly to say this is how you do it. I know IEBC is requiring parties right now to meet that threshold in their nominations, but it's proving to be very difficult, because in a constituency where the people go to the ballot and they elect a man, how do you go back and tell those same people that we are going to step down this man you have elected to put a woman so that we can meet the 2/3 threshold? That becomes defeatist. It's actually discriminatory against the men. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board, particularly on that particular constitutional requirement. Having said that, I think we have zero political will to implement this particular requirement of making sure that we have women participate in equal measure with men at the governance level, at leadership. Because if we had that, we would not be having cabinets which do not meet the 2/3. we would not be having boards. I mean, for appointive positions, there is no excuse. The only reason is because there is no political will. Because in a case where you are required to appoint maybe the cabinet or PSs, or even at the county level, the CECs, CEOs, and these are appointive positions, or where the employment is on a competitive basis. You can actually, the authorities, the government can go out of its way to make sure that the 2/3 principle is observed. But in many cases, it is not being observed. And it is not because we don't have competent women to serve in those various positions. It's just because the will is not there. And I think we still have a long way to go because, you know, with my experience in Parliament and with my women colleagues, we have tried to push that 2/3 thing in Parliament. We have even gone to the length of enticing our male colleagues, taking them for dinners. We spent a lot of money taking them for dinners, for dances, just to like bring them to a point where they understand what we are saying. But on the day of voting, we have male colleagues who their role responsibility would be to make sure that they deny the House the required numbers so that we don't pass the 2/3 law. And it beats logic, because if anybody understands the principle of, you know, ensuring we have gender equity in all aspects of, you know, leadership, all the positions, it is not about women. It is actually about the development of a country. It's about the GDP of the country, because the more you continue suppressing women, and you see the suppression is not only in these big positions. You realize that those programs that target the empowerment of women, they don't get the necessary attention. They don't get the sufficient budgeting so that we can make sure that women are participating at various levels, even the women in business, women in manufacturing. I think the government should go out of its way to make sure, because there has been a historical discrimination of women, historical sidelining of women, put out some deliberate affirmative action measures to make sure that women are brought on board in all sectors of development of this country. And it would contribute to an enhanced GDP, you know, it would contribute to moving Kenya forward. I think it's the former president of the US who said that, you know, if you go into a football match and half of the team is not playing, how do you expect to win, you know? So I think it's high time that we had open conversations. We should have open conversations so that this 2/3 monster, you know, it looks like a monster. Every time you talk about 2/3, it's like it's women against men, and that's not what it should be. It should be looked at from a very wide scope, you know. Let's not trivialize the need for women to be in the core of, you know, governance positions, and making sure that we are giving enough attention and support and budgets to those things that will make sure women are brought on board in the running of this country. As a women representative of Narok, with the short period within which we got the national government affirmative action operationalized, I have done a lot of work in Narok, and the highlight of which is I ran a scholarship program for very, very needy children, both boys and girls, but predominantly girls, where I had about almost 90. I was able to, because of the budgetary constraints, I was able to bring about 90 children into that program. And the biggest highlight for me was in the most recently released KCSE results, where 90% of my scholars made it to university. And that really is, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. And I'm only praying that the next leader who comes, either as governor for Narok or woman rep, will take up that lot of kids and see them through university or college. So that's one thing I was able to do. The other thing that I put a lot of effort in was from the economic empowerment of women. I focused mainly in the dairy sector, again because I have seen the potential of a dairy business. I have seen how it has made a turnaround. I have done several benchmarking tours of various parts of this country, where I know that when we support our women farmers in the dairy sector, they can turn things around in terms of their livelihoods. You will realize that in the Maasai community, where I come from, and most of our communities, again, I spoke about the land issue, which might be extreme, but in terms of property ownership, women still have a long way to go. And I always say the only thing that we own at the moment, because even me as a member of parliament, I actually have no control over. I could buy a cow and take it home, but my husband will not consult me the day he wants to send it to the market for sale. So if that can happen to me, you can imagine those other women. The only thing I have control over is the milk I milk from my cows. I can decide how much to sell it for and what to do with the money. And at least for now, the men have not been coming to snoop and say, how much milk did you get out of the cow today? So I've been encouraging women. This commodity that we own, the women own 100% in control. And I know the potential of dairy. When we take it, right from, the raw product of milk selling and value addition where we do, yogurt and these other things. So with the little GAF funding, I have invested a lot of it in training of our dairy farmers, the women. I have bought milk coolers in the county, which are mostly run by women. And of course we have men being part of those. But I have seen how much they have turned lives around for those women. And that is why I was looking forward to run as governor, so that I could scale that up to another level with more funding. I have worked with the border sector, assisting these young men. You realize that a big percentage of our people now are depending on the border for transport and for day-to-day running of their businesses. So I have been working with the administration, the county commissioners, the police, because of the conflict that keeps coming up between the police and these young people. And for me, I have been wanting all of us to change our perception, to know that when a young man is on top of that border, that is his office. That is where he's getting money to feed his children. That's where he gets his money to feed, to take his children to school. So the immediate need for them is for protection of that business, so that they can do it without a lot of intimidation or all this fighting with the police. But also on their part, they must be compliant with the requirements of the law. So I have had over 500 young people trained, licensed, and also kitted with reflector jackets and helmets. So where they are freely able to do their businesses. Narok is a very water-scarce county. I was not able to do much in terms of large-scale water projects, but I am almost being called Wamatangi in Narok because of the water tanks that we have filled across the county to dispensaries, to schools, and they have gone a long way in alleviating the water problem, the water scarcity in the county. The persons living with disability, we have reached out to a number of them in terms of equipping them with the assistive devices. I know there are teachers whom were able to get the braille machines for them to be able to do their work properly. Some persons with disability who are business women, the only thing they needed is to be able to move around and go to the market like everybody else, instead of selling her wares right at her doorstep. So we have also reached out a number of persons living with disability from that front. In the area of talent and encouraging young people to actually explore their talent, I've done football tournaments in the county, and we have had some youth taken into professional football clubs from a tournament. I was actually the first leader of Narok County to do a county-wide tournament. And we got a lot of people, identified by professionals, and they have joined the professional teams, football. So I think if we get more funding going into the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, a lot can happen, because it is complementary to CDF. CDF does not respond to these social problems or social issues that women have, persons living with disability, and the youth. So I think we should have more money going into that, so that we complement the other, infrastructure development through CDF. Very many groups have benefited from grants that we give them to support their small businesses, and it's been great serving the people of Narok in that capacity. And I'm looking forward to the next level of service to this country.
Anything you think you would have done differently?
As a women rep? Yes. In terms of what I could have done differently, I think one of the biggest challenges that I was faced with is working with so many groups of women and youth, and their financial literacy is very low. So you find that when you give them money, when it comes to actualizing whatever concepts they gave you in their proposals, becomes a problem. And if I was to do anything else differently, it would be, first of all, to do a lot of investment in financial literacy training of our women, our youth, so that they can be able to really improve their businesses in the way that they actually say they will, in the kind of proposals they bring to the government, National Government Affirmative Action Committee. And only then would they benefit, because the money is already little. So if they don't have the capacity to actually plow it back into their businesses, for the businesses to expand, then it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle where people are getting money, but they're actually not improving in their businesses. So I think a lot of emphasis should be put into financial management training, business management training for our masses. Having served as, with communities and a leader in the House leadership of the National Assembly, I think there is still a lot to be done to make sure that we have effective citizen participation in the legislative processes. Members of the public can bring their petitions here, and they can be prosecuted. There are all these public participation exercises, but I still feel like to what extent is this public participation actually serving Kenyans to a point where we are really getting all Kenyans being part of this process, because the reason why we can get petitions from the public is to make sure that the members of the public are really part and parcel of the legislative process, far and beyond having a representative sitting here in this house. So I think we need to have a lot of more open days where we can have members of the public, you know, come into Parliament, understand the operations of Parliament. Beyond that, I have seen members of the Senate doing Senate sittings across the counties. I think it can be done also. I know the National Assembly is huge in terms of numbers right now, that most of the business we cannot even finish when we are seated here in this chamber. So requiring that we go around 47 counties, really to demystify the workings of Parliament and to invite members of the public to feel like, you know, this is their Parliament. They need to be part of it. They need to be part of the legislative process. We could do once in a while, you know, do a house sitting in a region. We might not say counties, but you know, that creates more awareness. It makes Parliament, you know, closer to the people, so that they don't feel like it's only for the elite or this one representative they send to the House. Maybe that could open it up for more citizen engagement. Yes, I'm not running for any elective office at the moment. I'm a very active member of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. We are a few days to the election, serving full-time in the presidential campaign of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. I'm giving myself to the party, and God willing, when Kenya Kwanza Alliance comes into office, there will be immense opportunities for me to serve this country in various capacities. So I'm really open, and I would like to also, you know, go back into legal practice. I've been away for quite a while now, so I want to find my bearing back. And it's actually my intention that whichever other position I'll be serving in, I would like to root myself more firmly in my primary career as a lawyer. For a breather is one, to spend time with my children and family, and then cows. I'm a farmer, I'm a dairy farmer. I love my cows. And when I'm out there in the farm, it's just a whole different world altogether. And I find a lot of peace in doing my farm work. And I think I'm really hoping that in my next line of service to Kenya, I want to dedicate more time to my cows.
So I come to Narok and find you in your gumboots and...
Yes.
Do you know how to milk?
Oh gosh, yes. I milk. I just love cows. Let me say that.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I drive back home to my farm, it just re-energizes me, and I'm not able to do that every so often as I would want. But I know I'll be finding more time, because you know I have been in public life for close to 17 years now, almost 18. So maybe I'll slow down a little bit as I go ahead. Yes.